Hey guys, welcome to our first episode here at Farmside Chats. We are here with Ralph Robertson, who just told me that his family has been farming. Next year will be 100 years on their family farm here in Carroll County. Ralph has quite a history with Carroll County. We're going to dive into that a little bit, but we're super excited. Our history starts with Ralph is actually a neighboring farm here to us here at Local Homestead, and supplies a lot of beef for us, and then we help farm back and forth together. So we are super excited about this, but we're just going to dive in and talk to Ralph about farming, how it's changed, what it looks like. And I guarantee you, as every conversation I've heard, Ralph's going to complain about the skid loader that he bought a year ago and hasn't gotten yet. So
you had to start it out with a bad subject, didn't you, Trevor?
A bad subject.
But it's an anticipation there that we're going to have it soon.
Soon, and they've been telling you soon for
over a year.
Over a year. So let's start with a little bit of history. I want to dive into that subject because I think it's something that has to be told about how we in ag are waiting on stuff that we need. But let's dive first into, tell me a little bit of story about grandparents or parents or how they got here to Carroll County, and we'll start with that.
Well, the Robertson family, we're kind of proud that we're Scottish heritage. Some people say that makes us cheap. Some people say that makes us a little bit wary about how we move forward. But we are what we are. On the other side of my family, it's mostly German. The names of Frock and Krumbacher go back to the German side. But we've been in Carroll County for many, many years. My grandfather, as far as I understand the history, started out as, I wouldn't call him an indentured servant, but he worked for other people and tried to establish himself in the agricultural industry by taking a chance early in his life on buying a farm. And it was quite a large farm. Depression hit, and he lost it. That's not something to be proud of in a way, but I am in a respect that he persevered. It didn't stop him from his goal. So after regrouping, he and his wife Alice came down to the farm that we're living on now. In 1924, he took another shot at buying a farm, a lot smaller place, one that needed an awful lot of work done on it, and one that was maybe half as productive as the farm that he originally tried to settle on. But he made his way, and he was a well-known person in the community for his generosity, not in money, but in his time and effort and helping other people. He hauled cattle for him. He hauled milk. He broke work horses for the community. People who had horses that couldn't manage, they'd bring them to Pappy Robertson, and he would work these horses.
Now, he would have hauled milk in cans.
He hauled milk in cans to a local train station here, right over the hill from us as we're sitting here, to Medford, Wakefield Valley train station. There was an Avondale train station that's just a few miles apart, but that's how they moved milk, and that went to a local milk processing plant. Many of them were around, and so they were in the dairy business. That was the one industry that would give you a constant income, whether it was a good one or not. It was a constant income, something there that you could rely on. So he began dairy farming and was an original member of a local milk cooperative, which was a Baltimore cooperative. And he stayed with that cooperative, and our family stayed with that cooperative for a long time, and still until certain mergers started taking place. when I began dairy farming then.
Okay.
So he was kind of proud of that, being a person who worked with cooperatives then, and they worked for the farmers, helped out an awful lot in the dairy industry because it was so scattered. It was fragmented. Some people sold milk locally. Some sold door to door. There were no real restrictions on health.
Because at that point in time, a co-op was something new.
It very much was.
That wasn't. You got rid of your product on your own. You didn't help any.
And there were certain things that the government started doing, and we don't want to get too deep in the weeds here about government, but there was an act through Congress called the Carroll-Volstead Act that helped bring cooperatives together and gave farmers then a say in some of their marketing and a say in some of their needs in buying supplies. It was, agriculture is so diverse and so complicated in a lot of ways that if you really dig deep in the weeds and see how far it's come and how much we've relied on each other and how much we've relied on technology, no matter how slow it started to move, and now we're in a rapid pace of technology. All these things melded together as they did in large businesses. We're not the Henry Ford of agriculture, but believe me, when you compare agriculture and how far it's come to the other industries around, agriculture never took a back seat to the growth of this nation.
Well,
it's really amazing. That's a long way from Pappy Robertson, but he was a part of all that, and we've been a part of all that.
Absolutely. One of the stories that I got told from Skip Roach, who who was a local farmer here in the area, about my grandfather was the fact that he was one of the last guys to give up planting corn with horses. He wanted to plant corn with horses, and it's crazy to think that we are not that far in years away from that, away from a time where people farmed with horses.
Well, change comes hard for some people, and the older I get, the harder change comes for me.
Well, in the ag industry altogether, I'd say change is hard for the whole industry to take on.
But it just the technology that's out there today is absolutely mind-boggling. We can do so much now that we never even fathomed that could happen before. And that I look at things two different ways. We're either the innovators in agriculture of much of the technology that's out there because we've done it in real time. In other words, you just don't throw a seed in the ground and watch it grow like some of our politicians think that's the way it's going to happen. It doesn't. But it takes a while to realize that seed has many forms. You still have to put it in the ground. It still has to grow roots. It still needs Mother Nature to help it along. But we've done so much to enhance the ability of that seed to help feed those 9.5 billion people that are out there in this world. Well, that's how important agriculture is and how far it's come.
And that's one of the things that we like to talk about is the fact that some of the problems that we have are the same problems that our parents or grandparents had in farming.
Oh, yeah.
Whether we get the rain or not is the same problem that they had. Yeah. But there's some of these problems here that they would have never, ever seen coming.
Well, and one of them is some good and bad things, and I'm talking about regulations. We're all subject to more and more and more regulations. Many of those regulations were needed. I'll be the first to admit that. So many of them now are not the result of actual testing of chemicals or testing of crops, or it's based on emotion. And I don't know why we can't get back to the point where we have to we're now defending everything we do. That's a problem that I see. I don't mind talking about the cattle I raise. I welcome anybody to come in and see how we raise those cattle. You know, they're housed well, they're fed well, they're handled well. But I have to defend the fact that I do it that way, because there's a perception out there that many people may not be, and I don't believe that.
Yeah.
Because if I don't handle those cattle well, if I don't oversee my crops the best way I can, I'm not going to make a living doing what I'm doing. It's that competitive now, and it's that much of a challenge. And like I say, the older I get, the more I'm cognizant of that.
And one of the things, as you talk about the cows, is the fact that there's this idea that we look at them as just numbers. No. And that's not the case at all. No. Because I know you've been on the phone with me when we've got a down cow. I've been on the phone with you when you have a down cow. It's not a fun experience. You're putting your heart and soul into trying to make that cow better.
Yeah.
We don't want to lose a cow.
No, it boils down to a little bit more than economics. But some things you can't avoid. You can't avoid someone falling down and breaking their legs. And I'm talking about a human being.
Yep.
So if that happens to an animal, we basically respond in the same way. We try to fix it. We try to make something better. And in the meantime, we're doing it realizing that any medications we use has to be approved. You know, we have to be very cognizant of that. We use very little amount of medication. We do some vaccination on our cattle to make sure, just like you're vaccinated, I'm vaccinated for different things. We do that with cattle. That avoids it. So we do a lot of preventive maintenance, I'll put it that way. Not only on our equipment, but on our cattle. And that takes a lot of being observant. And whatever you do is about the most important management tool you can use. So, you know, I guess my frustration goes back to the point that I don't feel like I have to defend myself against anything as far as my cattle, the way I raise my crops, how I handle my conservation of my farm. I invite anybody to come in and take a look at it.
You're not hiding anything.
Well,
this is the way you do it.
We can't.
No, and
we've buffered our streams against runoff. We have built expensive sheds, and I will say that some of those sheds were subsidized through the Soil Conservation Service, and they've done a good job of helping us do that. But you look for the end result, and that end result is better for everybody.
And I think one thing that most people don't realize is that Maryland farmers really take the biggest load of of making sure that the water's clean.
Well, it's
compared to other states, because we have the Chesapeake Bay, and we have been the area where they do a lot of testing on what farm runoff is, what runoff is in general.
Well, the farmers have stepped up and done a major part of helping clean up the bay. The bay is a jewel. It is something that we need to cherish and to protect. I agree with that.
And we like eating the stuff that's in
but
it.
It's not a one-sided argument. In other words, when you look at stormwater management, it's not the runoff from the fields that we have to worry about. It's a runoff from the streets, from the houses, from the roofs that are around, from industry, from parking lots. You know, we have to take all that into consideration. So one industry, which is the largest industry that controls the land, kind of takes the brunt of all that. And for us to be in charge of cleaning all that up, that's an impossible task.
And one of the big things that I think is important to say is we are so regulated on what we can put on the fields, what can go on, when it can go on, and if it's being used by the crop that's going in it. But Harry homeowner that wants his grass to be green isn't regulated on that as much.
And he can keep his grass green with a lot less than he's doing. We've all learned. We've learned that in the agricultural industry. Again, we're kind of we're kind of leading the way here. We've learned to get more out of using less. And I'm going to reveal a lot of things, but I don't care. I'm 75 years old. I've used chemicals in the past that should never have been issued.
Mm-hmm.
I realize that. Now, when you look at the amount of chemicals we use or the amount of fertilizer we use, we understand that it has safened things up so much. It's unbelievable. It's amazing. I've seen it. And the same way with the fertilizer. We test our fields. We understand how much nitrogen, potassium, potash, phosphorus. We understand how much we need to grow that crop. For us to put twice as much nitrogen down as we need is killing my bottom line. I'm not going to let that happen.
Yeah.
So we've fine-tuned all that, and still, our yields are growing for a lot of reasons. Our usage of fertilizer has gone down. Our usage of chemicals has really gone down. Integrated pest management has taken over, so that you're not going to go out there and just spray that crop just for the heck of spraying it. You're going to go out there and spray it because there are certain things that need to be done. And now we're talking about ounces, not gallons per acre.
And these changes are coming every year.
Oh yeah.
Every year there's a different change, and it's getting better.
I rely on a lot of expertise around me to help me on the things that I don't know. And of course, that's kind of been my mantra all along, that when I was in the dairy business for many years, my wife and I had a fairly good-sized herd of cows. We learned early on to hire, number one, hire good people to help you, and number two, hire people to do things that you don't know how to do, because they do them better.
Yep. Can't beat a man at his own game.
And it really pays off. It really pays off. I enjoyed being in the dairy business. We were in the dairy business, my wife and I, for about 37 years. And we realized that there were certain things that we needed to move on about. And then we transitioned from the dairy business into the beef business. But the idea of managing the details is always there, no matter where you go.
Do you miss milking the cows?
I've told a lot of people, dairy farming, in my mind, is a young man's game. Very demanding. Very demanding. And when you get to a certain age, if you don't have the family or the young person to take your place or take over for you, it becomes a burden. And when we realized that it was starting to become a burden, it was time for us to transition and let somebody else do that job. That's why we transitioned to beef. We always did raise some beef, but we went into it with a passion after the cows went. Do I miss it? I missed it twice a month for a while, because that's when the milk checks came. But a person who worked for me for probably 15 or 16 years, when I told her that we were going to sell the cows, she said to me, there's life after cows. So there's life after beef, there's life after vegetables, there's life after... There's always somebody, and you hope it is, but there's always somebody that's going to be a little bit better that can take your place.
Yep.
But you hope that you're there to help them learn some of that. That's the point you get to. That's about where I am now. So I hope you don't listen to half the things I tell you, but
sometimes I do.
But you're coming along, and I have a lot of faith in you now.
Sometimes I try to listen, but one of the things I wanted to talk about too, and something we haven't touched base yet on, is as farmers we rely on somebody to lend us money to be able to do things in ag, because banks wouldn't be able to, or wouldn't look at us in the same way as somebody that understands farming. And Ralph spent many years on the board of Farm Credit for Mid-Atlantic Farm Credit, who is now Horizon Farm Credit. He was on the board before it was Mid-Atlantic Farm Credit. I know Ralph already told his age, so I don't have to tell how young he is. But can you talk a little bit about your time at Farm Credit? What was done? I know the reason I'm so passionate about this side of it is because Ralph is what connected me to Farm Credit. Ralph actually nominated me for a Farm Credit Award. Gosh, that was 8 years ago now, something like that.
That was a national award too. It wasn't just a local award. And I heard about this. Farm Credit used it as a promotional, and so they awarded. I don't know if you mind telling people or not, but they awarded $10,000 grants. Actually, they were more than grants. They were a prize based on certain things that you accomplished on your farm and in your business. And early on, my wife and I talked this over, and I thought you had demonstrated a great ability for growing your business and doing the things that you did on this with this farm market. I saw you step by step increase what you were doing, and you did it well. That's what we were looking for, some excellence in things like that. As far as the Farm Credit Board, I'll just give you a personal experience that happened to me, why I even connected with Farm Credit, and that's back when it was before Mid-Atlantic. It was Central Maryland Farm Credit. So it was about a $200 million bank. Now Horizon Farm Credit is probably in the $3-4 billion range, $5 billion.
I would think somewhere around there.
But I had borrowed money early on to renovate my farm, start to grow our dairy operation. So I needed money to build a fairly good sized shed and a silo to house our crops. Prior to that, I had been dealing with a local bank, and I had pretty well paid them off way before schedule. I went in to build this, to get money to build this facility, and I was turned down by the local bank. They told me that they were moving out of the agricultural business and moving more towards residential and more industrial business and all that, a bank that we had dealt with for years. I had a lot of trust in that bank, and they disappointed me. I walked out of that bank and walked down the street in Westminster, and there was a Farm Credit office down there. I walked in, didn't know anybody in that office. The manager happened to be there. His name is Forrest Stout. I sat down and I said, here's what I need. I've just been turned down by a local bank. They didn't give me a good reason why. But I came down here to see what you could do for me. And before I left that office, I had my loan. Now, that taught me a lot. And then I was lucky enough to be nominated on the board. I spent 20 years on the board, was part of multiple integrations of the different businesses, and finally wound up now, when I went off the board, the next step was another merger that's now Horizon Farm Credit. They were good to me. They helped me out an awful lot when I needed the help. That's what they're there for. They're a cooperative, and they consistently pay dividends back to their membership, and they keep a tab on their membership to make sure that if there's needs that you have, they help you do a business plan to make sure that money's paid back. So they play a tremendous role, and they do not take from the taxpayer, although they're regulated by the government. There is no doubt in my mind that they are the reason we have been able to grow like we have, because when I couldn't find the capital to
grow the business in the beginning, they were the ones that stepped up and helped. After that prize award, we got loans from them. They're the only bank I deal with. And now it's starting to sound like we're doing a commercial for them. But
well,
I don't want to be like that.
Well, and I thought about that too. There are more and more banks in this area that are willing to talk to farmers because they see the added value that a farmer brings to the table when he's there to borrow money. It's a pretty good bet when you really think about it.
Oh, absolutely. There's a whole lot of capital on a farm.
Well, but we've learned to manage so much better than we did before. There's so many tools out there to use to help us keep moving forward and not stub our toe and make the big mistake. Farm Credit was part of that. There are other banks in the area too that are stepping up and doing things. And believe me, Trevor, I'm all for competition. So I love those competitive banks out there.
So we're gonna finish this up soon, but the last thing I wanted to ask was if you had all the knowledge that you have now, but back, let's say 30 years ago, what would you change in how you did things?
I'd probably go into garbage collection business. That's not what you expected, was it?
That wasn't what I expected.
Well, when I was in college, I used to kid people, and they said, and when I was in college, I majored in history and political science. Wound up being a dairy farmer. But what would I do different? I think I'd take a few more chances. I was fairly conservative, but that conservatism did pay off. But there were some things that came up that I should have taken a chance on, but I did not ever want to wind up like Pappy and have to start over.
Yep.
And I did make one rule that, thank goodness, Farm Credit worked with me on, and so did other lending institutions if I ever went to them, which I hardly did. But I never mortgaged my farm. We're in a very competitive area here as far as farming and land availability, competition with residential housing. And in another segment, I would love to give a commentary on ag preservation in Carroll County.
Absolutely.
Because I was pretty heavily involved in that, as you well know. But I want people to understand how all this works together to make a better community. Agriculture, residential, industrial, commercial, it's all needed, but you do it in a way that makes the community better. And I think we've done that in Carroll County. That I think is one of the things I'm most proud of where I live.
Absolutely.
Where I live.
We mesh as a community here where you have the farm, but you also have the commercial and industrial side of things.
And
here
the
in this county.
competitiveness, I've talked about this before, the competitiveness in the farming community has made us all better farmers.
Absolutely. Because
I've always realized that. I've always felt that way. And I never was the biggest farmer in the county and never tried to be. I was never the smallest farmer. But the niche that we have worked. So every individual farming operation is way different. What you do here, Trevor, is polar opposite to what I do.
Absolutely, and that's what
But
I was
it
going
both
to say.
works.
Yeah, it's everybody finds their own niche, and that's what makes it work. Because if we didn't do this, our farm wouldn't be able to be corn and soybeans and make a living off of it.
Trevor, there's one word that sums up everything, and that's the passion for it. If you got the passion for it, then everything else comes in. You learn from that passion. You make mistakes because you have a passion for it, but it's how you handle those mistakes that shows the real you, and that's what's so good about it. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you coming out. I know this was the first session, and I wanted to be Ralph because Ralph's kind of been with me for so many years here and heard all my problems with the market and all the ups and all the downs. And Ralph's been by my side for many years, and I look up to Ralph, and I think very highly of you. And I'm happy to try this podcast. I think it's going to work. This has been a lot of fun, just sitting down and talking. The fire's nice to be by, too.
Sure is on a day like this.
On a day like today.
But we need the moisture.
Absolutely. So, definitely, guys, we're going to be every month posting about our podcast. Every month, the last day of the month, you will see a new one coming out and get to look forward to who's going to be on for the next month. So, we are super excited to see how this year turns out, but thanks again to Ralph, and thank you for farming and continuing the passion that your grandfather had for it.
Well, it's an ongoing thing, a new challenge every day.
Keeps on
That's
going.
exciting.